Well, good morning. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak with you today. And as it was suggested, I am going to speak about trust. For those of you in the room who don't know Edelman, we are about 6,000 people now globally. We're the largest independent public relations company in the world. Our CEO, Richard Edelman, is very much known as synonymous with trust. He presents the Trust Report at Davos every January, and that's usually based now on a study we put in the field in about 25 countries, usually between October and November each year, and then we bring the Trust Report to life, as I said, at Davos in the January. Given the current conditions that we're facing, we've actually just gone back into the field to speak to consumers in the current crisis about how they feel government, NGOs, business and brands are actually going to help show them the way forward. So I hope that what I will share with you today will give you something to think about in these very uncertain times, especially the opportunity each and every one of you has in your companies with your employees, your partners, as well as your end consumers to build trust and to be known for what we really think trust is about, which is doing the right thing. And that's actually part of the question we ask people globally now when we ask them about companies. Do you think they're doing the right thing? And then we break that down with them. So we had a rather good start at Davos this year because it was our 20th annual Trust Report. And who would have thought when Richard started researching this 20 years ago that it would become so important for companies to understand today? So we've seen several long-term trends over those various years. Very much so the inversion of influence. 20 years ago, we actually thought the people at the top were the people we trusted the most. That's actually flipped now. We've seen the rise of what we call peer influence and the decline and credibility of authorities in favor of the familiar and more relatable people like me. And the digital revolution has certainly helped that along because now we can reach out to so many other people in real time to get their opinions and their views. So we're no longer sort of caught in this pyramid of having to always look to the top for the right answer. We've seen a huge growth in what we call the battle for truth. In recent years, we've seen a growing sense of unease around quality information and the undermining of shared sense of truth about important problems. I don't think there's anyone in this room who doesn't know the phrase fake news. And we're dealing with all of that on a daily basis. And again, given the current crisis, more important than ever that consumers understand the source of the information they're getting. We've certainly at Edelman now with our clients globally, we've engaged Dr. David Navarra, who's Special Envoy to the United Nations and the World Health Organization, and he's speaking with our clients on a weekly basis, updating them. So I'd rather people were looking to the WHO website than perhaps the front page of The Sun. The third really big trend we've been seeing is this long-term interplay between business and government. In recent years, these two institutions have actually grown further apart in trust. Trust in government has languished since the aftermath of the Great Recession, while business has been perceived as a problem solver. So I come to you today with some bad news, but also a great opportunity for business to step up and actually show the way. The challenges we will see in this year's report is that business needs a much stronger, more trusted partner to get things done. This notion of partnership and collaboration, which Sean spoke about, is essential for consumers to really build trust in organizations. So this year, in our 20th anniversary, we're looking at the dimensions of trust in detail, the relative importance of an institution's competence. And by competence, we mean the ability to get things done. And then there's another element to trust which has really come to the fore recently, and that's the notion of ethics. And by ethics, we really do mean, are you doing the right thing? Are you doing the right thing by me and my family? To employees, to their employer, are you doing the right thing by me as an employee? So let's get into the data. In addition to their personal, economic, and job loss fears, people report a general sense that the pace of change, particularly with technology, is happening way too fast. There's no watchdog for technology. The government is not seen as understanding emerging technologies, certainly enough to regulate them effectively. And there are very strong concerns emerging about deep fakes and technology that manipulates sound and images, making it difficult to know what is real. I know in the recent election, and we've seen this in almost every country with an election in the last year, this sense of both fake news, how technology is manipulating what people are reading, what's coming up on their social media, the echo chambers of Facebook and Instagram. So there are really strong concerns emerging here. As an industry sector, technology is beginning to show weaknesses in our data in its historically strong levels of trust. This year, it is not the most trusted sector, as it has been in the past. And this is in 9 of the 28 markets that we researched end of 2019. Note that the UK, Australia, Canada, Hong Kong, Ireland, Italy, Russia, Singapore, and the Netherlands all reported declines in trust in the technology sector. And they're really quite significant, down 4 points globally, with even higher declines year on year in places like France, Canada, and the United States. Okay, worry about quality information, as I said, the notion of fake news. Related to those concerned about technology and the pace of change, people are worried about being able to discern what is actually real. There's so much information out there, but how do I decide if it's real or not? And if I can trust that information that is available to me? We believe that even the media personally use it now, and that it's contaminated with untrustworthy information. And we've seen a 6% increase in the last 2 years in the percentage of the general population who say they are very worried about fake news being used as some kind of weapon against them. I can only imagine that these numbers are even more strained with the current COVID-19 crisis. I mean, it's really got out of hand. And while we have significant societal challenges, we do not believe that we can trust our leaders to step up and effectively address these challenges. 2 in 3 people researched do not have confidence that our current leaders will successfully address our country's challenges. Now, this is data we collected last November, pre-COVID. So can you imagine the results we are going to get back? I'm very disappointed that we're still in field and we won't have this new data till next week. And if I can get a précis together, I'll certainly send it to you, Leslie, if any of the gathered today would like to see the absolute up-to-the-minute numbers. But in a new question, we asked people who they trust to do what is right. And I think this was reported earlier. The only types of people they say they trust now are scientists. Many of the people in the room, experts and regular people in their local community, fellow citizens just like them, their peers. I mean, look at those numbers going down. Journalists are down, government leaders. We've put them in red this year. They're right at the bottom of the barrel. Government leaders, religious leaders, they're distrusted, and we're not even sure right now about CEOs either. I put this chart together and just sort of threw it in a couple of days ago. It's only from last week, but I think, I just grabbed this from the USA, Italy, UK, Japan headlines on one day as coronavirus was really starting to take hold. This lack of belief and direction coming from each government in each country. When something like this happens, the normal reaction would be, I will look to my leadership to show me what to do. But what I'm going to go on to show you is that the leadership people are actually looking for is the leadership from their employers. The employee-employer relationship is now the closest relationship we find in culture. So people are going to work every day and hoping that their leaders, their CEOs, are going to show them what to do next. I mean, without trust in institutions on any societal level, people are taking the future into their own hands. Just in the last year, we've seen a 16-year-old girl lead a pop-up school strike movement to demand action on climate change. We've seen employee protests, which in 2019 grew out of the tech sector. We've seen it spread to other sectors with employees taking action and demanding accountability on issues such as automation, inequality and sexual harassment. And we're seeing this groundswell demand for change and action for institutions to work together to get things done and move us into a better future. This is where it gets a bit uncomfortable presenting this data, because here are the results. When you plot out where institutions fall on an axis that we've created, with the two axes points being around ethics and competence, nobody fares very well on both. The first thing I'd like you to notice is that wonderfully big empty space in the top right-hand quadrant. Now, for most of you, I'm an academic as well. I'm an adjunct professor at Boston University in communications. I'm putting charts up like this all the time. Usually, we've got something in that top right-hand quadrant, some brand, some business that is the holy grail, someone to look towards for guidance for the future. Big, fat, white space. And what we've done here is business is the only institution that's just made it to the right-hand side on competence. And this illustrates why we've been seeing the call for businesses and CEOs to tackle change, because we actually think you have the ability to, because you're competent. However, you're not ethical. So you might know how to do it, but do I actually trust your motivations and reasons for doing it? And there's another institution that's actually quite ethical most of the time, and we know that to be an NGO. But gosh, if any of you work within NGOs, nothing happens very quickly. So this notion of falling short on competence is the issue we face for NGOs, as being ineffective and fundamentally unable to get things done. So lots of good ideologies and well-meaning, but does anything actually move and move at any pace? And just to make it a little worse, I just wanted to show you the UK chart. Government. I mean, we couldn't track them any further down than there, otherwise I actually would have been out of, off the chart. So how much do you trust institutions to do what's right? And that's what we unpacked with trust this year. It's really quite a frightening story in the UK. October, November last year when we were in the field. As I said, I'm going to be interested to see what that chart looks like after next week's data comes back. So this finding is born out of our trust management data, which is an adjunct sort of data set, which we last year did in the United States, the UK and Germany. By 3 to 1, you will see that ethics matters more than competence when it comes to trusting a company. So here we are faced with a dilemma where I think companies are competent, I don't think they're ethical, but in fact, ethics is more important to me than competence. So what a wonderful opportunity. Our findings are based on tracking individual company trust of 40 major companies in these 3 markets. And the competence score explained only 24% of the total trust score. The other 76, as I say, being explained by dimensions around a company's ethics. And by those we mean a company's integrity, a company's purpose. And I don't mean just a local quick, program on the side to help children at Christmas time. I mean what's baked into your company in terms of your purpose. Are you actually set up to do well as do good in society? And lastly, your dependability. There is some good news, and the good news is that many companies and CEOs are now recognizing this reality, and they are taking action to realign their companies and their strategies in ways that are more inclusive and more ethical. In Europe, the consumer too was sort of raising expectations and asking brands to take action. According to the work we did last summer in Brands We Trust, belief-driven buying is now mainstream. And what I mean by belief-driven buying is a consumer who says, when I see 2 brands that are parity, okay, I can't really tell a difference between their functional attributes. I can't tell a difference between their price, their availability. If I understand that one brand is doing more than it makes, It's doing something in society, in community, something that matters. It's got a sustainability footprint that I really understand and believe in. I will choose that brand. Now, we've been tracking this for quite a long time. 10 years ago, that belief-driven buyer, unsurprisingly, sort of had a sort of a Birkenstock feel about them. They were younger, they were at university. Wonderfully, I congratulate them. They were probably vegan, early adopters, I'd say. I don't laugh about veganism. You'd be interested in some of the data we're collecting. Might just be a function of age. But really, this generation was a very finite generation. What we find now globally is the belief-driven buyer cuts through class, cuts through education, cuts through age. Then you only have to look at Iceland in the UK being the first retailer that had a plastics-free aisle. I think we could have all sat in a sort of intellectual ivory towers, not imagining that an Iceland consumer might care about such things. They cared about such things long before Waitrose had anything to do with it. So I think it's a very, very interesting time to realize you have more and more consumers, end consumers who are genuinely belief-driven, and they need to understand that you're stepping up to the plate and making some of the differences we need to see in society. In terms of building trust for the future, working in partnership across institutions is something that's going to become really important. It becomes possible then to address larger societal problems and collaborate to build a better future. It's crucial that business takes action to address these key issues for their employees, especially around wages, around education, and around training. To embrace an all-stakeholder model, not just a shareholder focus, to be the catalyst for change, and to partner across institutions to deliver solutions and a vision for the future for all. I'm now very briefly, because it's so sort of dim, I have to say, going to dive into some sector data, both globally as well as show you the highlights for the UK, because it may be of interest to you all. As Sean mentioned, it's not an industry that's in particularly good odor at the moment, but as a communicator by trade for the last 30 years, I always take that as an opportunity when the only way is up. And I think what you're going to see is that we've been tracking this food and beverages sector and seen that it's actually not keeping pace with the recovery in other sectors. Producing enough food for the future, what are we going to do to make sure that it's a reality, and how are we communicating it? This was a very simple question we asked people around the world across a number of issues. We simply said, we're interested in what you worry about. Specifically, how much do you worry about each of the following? And what our data is confirming to us is a poor perception of the food and beverage industry. And at the same time, as I said, an outstanding opportunity for companies and brands to tell a better story. So when we look at the concerns about producing enough food for the future, there's a clear opportunity to explain how technology and how other innovations might help with production efficiencies. It's also a space to tackle around food access, distribution, and very much so around food waste. I mean, given a third of the food we produce globally never makes it into somebody's stomach, a third. I mean, that's just the most obscene statistic I think I have for you today. And that the developed markets carry the burden of domestic food waste. As I'm sure all of you know, food waste in developing markets is further up the food chain in the inefficiencies in food development and a number of those sorts of areas right through to the retailer. But when we get into the developed economies, all our data suggests that the real problem that still needs a very heavy lift is domestic food waste. And you'll see a number of brands and companies, I think, stepping up to the plate on that. Let's just look at some of this data now. Food, and so I've just done green for you quickly there, so you can see the UK, global is on the left, and then we have the run of countries. Red is distrust, blue is trust, but these circles you're seeing very quickly when you're seeing a dark circle in black is where we're starting to see the numbers drop down. So I'll run through these quickly. Food and beverage trust is down globally as a sector, and also in the UK, where last year we saw a 2-point drop. Only slightly better than telecoms, but down from tech. And We split our survey globally into two cohorts. We have our general population, as the name suggests, self-explanatory, but we also have a group called the informed public. They're people who are between 25 and 64. They're college educated, so tertiary educated, top 25% of household incomes per age group. And they also report to us significant media consumption and engagement in public policy, interest, and business news. So this informed public, we're always tracking them as well to see where they are. So in 2019, we saw trust faltering right across the food system. 55% agreeing. I worry that the food and beverage industry does not have a plan for producing enough food to keep up with the surge in population growth. 65%, I worry that large-scale food and beverage production has harmed the environment and lowered nutritional standards. And a whopping 70% saying unless the food and beverage industry is forced to change its priorities, people's diets are going to become progressively less healthy over the next decade. This is general population. These aren't experts. These are people out there. If you disagree with any of this, step up and explain why. Lead. Show people what you mean and what you believe in. The biggest distrust is sitting globally in cell-based meat, unsurprisingly, gene editing and food additives. Cell-cultured meats, gene editing, 5 of 28 markets are all we have in trusting them. China, India, Thailand, Indonesia, and UAE, and their UK down at 36%. In 2020, any of you in the room in the fast food industry, you've got work to do as well. 6-point decline, which is quite a large one in the way we track. We're quite low down on the ladder there. Down a full 6 points is actually something I'd worry about significantly. It's really quite a large number versus some of the shifts we've been seeing. And down in the UK considerably as well. And that's 7 points down on the global average if you look at it sitting at 55. Anyone in the room making gin, thank you, but trust in the brewing and spirit sector seems to sort of be holding its own. I think I may have contributed to that as well. You've done fairly well relative to some other industries with only a 1-point shift south year on year. But in the UK, we're seeing overall trust in food manufacturers down as well, sitting at a 3-point decline year on year. And finally, we're seeing a 4-point drop in the UK year on year across grocery retailers. So again, it's either flatlining or dropping across all the industries I suspect are represented in the room today. With consumers saying that they trust them less than a year ago, some interesting drops in other markets as well. I mean, Italy down 5 points. Interesting to see given the current crisis. I'm embarrassed to say I'm Australian born, although I have been here for 30 years, but it was cringeworthy each morning watching the run on loo roll in Australia. I've got no idea why. Friends of mine who work for Hofstetter in the sort of the world of cultural insights would suggest that it has a lot to do with proximity and distance to authority. Australians have a very sort of laissez-faire attitude, and so if they want something, they have something. So it seems to have expanded to toilet paper as well this week. I apologise on behalf. Farming and fishery, anyone in the room? You're declining as well, down 3 points, but again, not as intensely as the 8-point drop that Australia had and Ireland had last year. And anybody operating in food additives as an industry, it correlates with a growing number of consumers reading labels more, showing concern about allergy more, and trying to eat cleaner diets. There's vegans popping up again. It's clear that we have to do more to build trust between individuals, organizations, governments, and society. So I'm really going to sort of conclude now on 3 clear priorities that we're telling all our clients who are working with Edelman in a number of markets. The first thing is you need to do the right thing. That's what sits behind trust. And by doing the right thing, we believe that means taking a long-term view and doing the right thing by your customers, by your employees, and also by your communities, not just your shareholders. Combine this with action. Not a vague commitment to a mission, a vision, and a glossy brochure, of which I'm sure many of you have, but genuinely tangible next steps and commitments. Our data shows people want business to take responsibility, particularly on training, on reskilling, and on job security. Remember, I said to you earlier, most people are going to work every day as an employee, and it's their employer that they're looking to for all the answers. Second to this one is partner up. Overwhelmingly, our findings show people believe governments must collaborate with businesses and with NGO. You are stronger together. People do not trust one institution. Remember my axes of competence and ethics. No one's got all of it. So you've got to come together, and together you will be stronger. To have this combination of competence, you can get things done, and ethics, you've got the right motivations to drive change. So it's really imperative that partnerships are forged to address these key issues. And my third one is lead. Now is the time to raise your reputational head above the parapet, particularly that of your CEO. And if there are CEOs in the room today, I'm speaking to you directly. And if there aren't, I would like you to go back and speak with your CEOs. It is important for business to share opinions on the big issues of the day. I wrote this paragraph pre-COVID. It's even more relevant now. This will require leaders to embrace difficult conversations and difficult changes. And there has never been a more pressing time than now for citizens to know that you have their backs, that you care, and that you are doing the right thing. So I just wanted to leave you with a couple of thoughts. A large part of the business Edelman does is in advising our clients around risk, around reputation, around trust. We both promote our clients globally, but we also protect them. So I just thought I'd give you a précis of what we're sharing with our clients. It's not costing you anything. It costs our clients considerably more. But, you know, my parting gift to you. Get your CEO out in front. This is not an HR conversation. This is not a conversation from anybody else in the organization. Business needs to be a player now, not a spectator. And your CEO has to be out front in communicating with employees and all of your relevant stakeholders. Frequent communications. Establish a cadence of frequent communications, preferably twice, sometimes even 3 times a week with your employees. You yourself are seeing how this situation is evolving and changing daily. This is not a weekly catch-up. It's as needed, but minimum twice a week. With your employees and again with your stakeholders to keep them updated on all relevant developments. Do not underestimate going to the WHO website every morning. Correct misinformation immediately. You will know more than most how the wrong news spreads. Nip it in the bud. You know, again, CEO, back up there in the afternoon to make a statement if something's gone around the building or the business during the day. Don't leave it overnight to fester, literally. Pick it up and sort it out. Create a platform that is routinely updated. And by this I mean, you know, if you've got a website, if you've got a company dissemination system, create a platform that you update routinely with pertinent information that may impact the lives of your employees and your company's operation. Set up an employee hotline. How many of you got one? Show of hands? Yeah, not enough. That should have been everybody. You have to have an employee hotline right now that they can call with any questions they may have. surrounding the virus. A lot of people won't be coming to you directly. They may feel a little uncomfortable or embarrassed. Am I panicking too much? I mean, I know I asked of Leslie a very kind of clear set of questions when I arrived this morning. I wanted to know if we knew the whereabouts in the last fortnight of every person in the room today. I'm not sure that we do, and I'd like to think that you're happy to share that information if asked. It's certainly what we're doing with any gatherings. I don't care if it's 5, 10 or 100 people. This is changing at a rate of knots. We need to be personally accountable to each other and to our employees. What we're calling a no regrets policy. Communicate a no regrets policy to your employees. If they want to work remotely or don't want to travel, provide them with that flexibility. I'm in fact the only person at Edelman in the UK today who is not working from home because today is your conference. We've actually closed the office today to check all our systems, to make sure that everything we thought works will work, so that if we do need to go to remote working, we can. So we closed the office at 6 p.m. last night. Everyone's allowed back in tomorrow morning, and all our tech teams, our HR teams are working through everything now to make sure we can operate at a remote level. But I think this no regrets policy is a really important one. And lastly, lead from the top. I think I've probably said enough on that, but this idea that your employees will want to hear it from the CEO and want to know that you have their best interests at heart. As I said, when we've got the update on the dip that we're doing with the general population, which is out in the field at the moment, I'll make sure Leslie gets an update on that. If any of you would like to speak to me or Edelman directly about your crisis management through this situation globally, locally, Leslie has all my details. And I think I'd probably just like to say thank you and please stay safe.